What a week. This has been crazy. I think I've mentioned in previous videos, there is so much change happening at the moment, and it's really exciting. Um, this video today is going to be probably more of a reflection, really. So, for context, to catch you all up, my last video, I was talking about and reflecting on, well, a couple of things, really, but how I think the relationship with my dad since him passing, well, even when he was still here, um, it was something I hadn't really fully felt into in terms of the emotions that were there toward him, around him, about him, etc. Um, and I think my much of my reflections over these past couple weeks, couple months have been around mum in particular. Um, and and this is something that I've been working with my counselor on, and something again came up today, which I'll touch on in a sec. But for context, since the last video that I did, I I don't know how to explain this really. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it in these videos before with the grief diaries, but I have always, well, I say always, I don't know how long I've kind of had this for, but I've always felt, for as long as I can remember, a um, connection, a very, very strong connection with musical theatre and musicals. When I was younger, that was in the form of Disney musicals, or any animated musicals. And then, now in just musical theatre, theatre in general, and just any musicals, whether it be flipping Disney Pixar musicals or musical theatre, live performances, musicals. Um, and music in general is something I really get very strong goosebumps just listening to songs, and especially when watching musicals. It's like my whole body just comes alive. So I've always wanted to, being a kind of natural like creator, somebody who loves to create things, I've always wanted to create a musical. I felt this kind of calling toward that for a long time, but I've just never really had you know the inspiration, or like I've never really known what to do it about, so I've just kind of parked it, because I think I've learned over the years not to force things. Like if I don't feel passionate, like if I don't feel there's a particular message or something, I'm not going to try and force I don't think a musical is a piece of work that you can just force, right? um and in this last week I had um this, whether you want to call it a download, um, but I kind of channeled this message and this whatever it was, and it just flowed through me like in the most unbelievable way. And I've effectively written a musical with 34 pieces, of songs. I think there's about 19 different characters in it now. I've written the lyrics, the songs, the structure. It's still saying that. It's still very much in the early stages in terms of like the things I haven't got yet is I have zero clue about musical theatre, um, costume design, set design, casting. Um, I had no clue about any of that. So this is something I'm in the process at the moment of kind of, speaking to people, and I guess trying to enroll people in this vision I have. I'll probably talk more about the musical in another video, but just to give context on that. So I was telling Angelina today, my counselor, about this, and just this whole thing, and we started talking about um, the relationship with my parents. And one of the, well, this is actually a thread in the musical, but one of the like core things I think when it comes to these different sides of me, the playful side, the more, masculine, serious side, the masculine and feminine basically is, I guess, the way to look at it. Um, I think I said to Angelina in a previous session that I feel like a person of two parts. And I think we all are, to an extent. Like none of us are just one person. We are multiple different parts. And I always felt this kind of very strong pull, like very polar opposite sides of masculine and feminine energy. And I used to think that I held both of them quite well because I would constantly go between them. And upon reflection of it, and with, Angelina kind of diving into it, what I realized is that actually I don't hold them well. what I do is I acknowledge they are both there and I go back and forth between them. And the thing I kind of realized after we kind of unpacked that is actually what I need to learn to do is to integrate them, because at the moment I do see them as just two separate parts of me that now they're in my awareness of. That's great because I can now move between them. But the real magic comes in the integration of those two parts. And as that translates to mum and dad, this wasn't, I think it's sometimes it's difficult when people pass on, you kind of see things from an outside perspective. You get to kind of reflect on things that you wouldn't necessarily have reflected on when they're here. There's a lot of like these things, you look at them in different ways. And she was talking about, I think it's like principles in the Kabbalah and their beliefs around kind of the parent and child relationship, is that the parents should focus on their relationship more than the child. And that probably sound like, I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but I can imagine to a lot of parents that probably sounds very like, no, the child away. And you kind of see this in movies and stories. It's like, my child comes first and then it's our marriage kind of thing. The issue with that is what often happens is, whether this is the mother or the father is kind of like, this is my baby, this is my child. It then draws a divide between the mother and father. And this isn't necessarily even about divorce or separation or anything, but I think the way they kind of see this principle in the Kabbalah is that, like, what it does is because if there is, the parents are putting the child first, and therefore there is this constant imbalance of who's spending more time with the child, and then the child has to learn to almost fight for the attention of another parent where they're not getting that love from. Whereas if the parents are focused on themselves, it frees the child up to be more playful and expansive, and also have a way to see this masculine and feminine figures and um model themselves and the integration of those parts within themselves on that. It's kind of the seeing a functional family, a mother and father who are focusing on their relationship is, in a metaphorical sense, the unity of the masculine and feminine energy. Whereas when the masculine and feminine energy are individually focused on the child, naturally there is a separation between the masculine and feminine energy, right? And when she said that to me, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And like, it's makes so much sense as to why I have this, like, I think like before I was, when I was younger, I didn't even necessarily realize, and I probably maybe was leaning more into the masculine energy, not so much the feminine energy. And it's only in kind of recent years I've explored, because I think I do have a very potent feminine energy and feminine characteristics in terms of compassion and things like that. And it's only really in recent years, I would say the last kind of 5-10 years, I've allowed myself to get more in touch with that. But it, like I say, it is still a separation. It is not an integration. So that's been really really like a breakthrough for me. And it's something that I am very like keen to try and work on. And I'm saying it's kind of interesting as well. It's almost like whether you call it a sign or like a permission slip, or I don't know, but the fact that they both passed away together at the same time, I've said this in previous videos, is just mind-blowing to me. And it is almost like, it is like a divine intervention, like a reconciliation of those two parts, of the love between those two people, and this rejoining, and without making, well, I can only speak from my perspective, and I was going to say, without making their death about me, but it does, it almost feels like this is, if you know, if I was to look at it from my perspective, it's kind of like maybe that is a reason. It's to see the reunification of those two individuals, so I can heal that part of me within myself, you know, and to help me to integrate that. So yeah, it's really fascinating, and I really wanted to share that because I feel like there's probably a lot of people in that same position and situation. You know, I think it's a very common thing, even in families and households where the parents are still together. It is very, very common, I think, where again, all of the energy goes toward the child, not the relationship, and then there is a imbalance. There is a divide, and the you know, the child is constantly having to, oh, how do I get dad's attention? How do I get mum's attention? And how do I manage these people's relationship unconsciously, you know? But it does very much happen. And yeah, I found that so fascinating and so interesting. So I really wanted to just share that reflection and where I am with that. And you know, I'm sure there will be more to share on this over the coming, you know, weeks and months, and I will, you know, keep you guys posted in terms of how that goes and the developments there. And I will probably do another video to talk more about the musical. It's very exciting, and it feels like, it feels really fucking important. Um, you know, without sounding too grandiose, like it really feels like the, possibly the most important thing I've done in my life, and something that I think the world really needs right now. And it's very much driven, you know, I'm not going to go too much into the plot, and it's nothing to do with my life and, you know, my family. It's actually a very different, uh, much broader topic. Maybe there's some, you know, metaphorical connections there, I don't know. But a big part of it, one of the notes that I wrote at the top was like, every song, every character, all of the scenes, the story, the plot must protect moral complexity at all costs. That is like the underlying thing. There cannot be any kind of, this is the message, this is the clear way, this is the right way of doing things. And I feel like that's really fucking lost. And it's one of the reasons I believe that there is such a, you know, divide within the world at the moment, because we just cannot bring ourselves to accepting that there isn't a clear right or wrong, good or bad to everything. There is this interconnectedness between everything, this complexity, this interwoven nature. We like to see things as very black and white. It's like, this is this is that. And life isn't that way. And I'm really like, and I feel like this is going to be really important, because the whole thing is around getting people to, even though it might be uncomfortable, to accept that, to see that, and to feel that. And I think musicals are such a fantastic way to get people to feel in a more, what's the word? They're kind of like, I think the reason they're so powerful is because they catch you off guard. You know, through song, you're kind of like listening, you're watching this performance unfold, and you are caught off guard sometimes by the messages, because, you know, they're not communicated directly. It's not like, you know, I'm just saying something to you. It is like this unfolding in this theatrical way. There's music, there's song, there's the scenes, there's the sets, like all of these things are happening in tandem, and they really do, I think, affect us in such a profound way. Anyway, kind of getting off a bit of a tangent, so I'll talk more about that when I feel that the time is right to kind of talk about it on here. And that's pretty much it for today's one. I just really wanted to share that reflection, because I found it so interesting, and that is something I'm going to be reflecting on more over the, you know, the coming weeks, and really kind of diving into that and doing some work there around that, you know, and that integration. So that was it for today, and I will see you guys in the next